Rolling.
Welcome, old family and new family, to BoomBappED, capital ED. This is one of your co-hosts with the mostest, Brother Brandon White. In MC circles, I'm known as Bushido Garvey.
What's going on, Rochester? Atlas, a.k.a. Aaron Thompson, coming at you.
Yes, and we have Brother Rob Lowe on the tech as per usual. And an honor doesn't describe the experience we're about to have with Regent Emeritus, with Scholar Extraordinaire, with Rochester legend, Dr. Cooper. We had the pleasure of interviewing him today. Dr. Cooper, thank you very much. Welcome to the show. For those who are listening, this will be a two-parter. You are engaged with part one. And those who are listening to BoomBappED for the first time, BoomBappED is an honest, open, and clear-headed exploration of education and cultural issues focused on, but not limited to, the Rochester area through a hip-hop lens.
Dr. Walter Cooper, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Part of what we do to begin the program, first of all, is we make sure that we're being properly recorded. Yeah, which I am. All right, thank you. One of the things that we do is we like to have a couple of icebreakers to just kind of get things started. We ask all of our guests, and I was joking with Bushido a little earlier that asking you to boil down your soon-to-be 90 years into a 1-minute soundbite is going to be a bit difficult, but we like to give folks an opportunity to present, to make a presentation to our audience, just kind of running down who you are, what you have done or do professionally, and what makes you tick outside of your professional work. In your case, we'll dig into all that, but whatever you want to give us to set things off, we like, give us about a minute's worth.
I would say almost 90 years. It's been a great journey. I've not limited myself to what I could do or where I could go. And so with that overall philosophy, I've been able to meet national figures, participate in a variety of activities which focused on the problems and the issues confronting African Americans. And so there are many problems still to be solved, and hopefully this generation, the new generation, can be more creative and more courageous in terms of solving the problem of racism in the United States.
Thank
you. So you just gave us a little bit that showed that you're ever forward thinking about what's to happen and what needs to happen. But we're going to ask you to take a little step back, take you way back, right? If you could time travel to any place and location in world history, where would you want to visit and participate in scientific contribution? Because for those who don't know, Dr. Cooper is the first, and make sure I get this right, I'm sure you will, is the first African American to receive a doctorate in chemistry at the U of R.
That's correct. Yes. And since I am a firm believer in history, I think your question is very germane. And since I've had the opportunity to visit Timbuktu twice during my life, in 1967 and 1977, I could imagine myself being at Timbuktu, the Ahmed Baba Institute at Timbuktu, when it was a flourishing law and medical school in the 12th century. And having worked with a director of that institute some years ago, I found that the documented papers, historical papers by scholars were present in Timbuktu and Gao region as early as the 13th and 14th centuries.
Well, let's just get right into it. You noted that when you were a young student, you took a very deep interest in nature animals. You didn't know any scientists personally, any black scientists. And although you were inspired by some that you read about, such as George Washington Carver and Percy Julian, you took the lack of black representation in science as a personal challenge. Why do you think black people continue to be so deeply underrepresented in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, despite our history of groundbreaking achievement in those domains?
I think it's because the fear of a challenge, which is going to involve discipline, focused work. Science permeates our very existence. Everything we do has a scientific component to it. And I think that exposure to good teaching can stimulate an interest in science and technology. I was part of, while on the Board of Regents, an active member. In 1992, the National Science Foundation gave the Regents $10 million to institute a STEM program from K through 8 in 11 schools of the state. Rochester had 3 schools, 55, 43, and 39. Buffalo had 1, Syracuse 1, Yonkers 2, and New York City had 4. So we had almost as many schools involved in a STEM program than New York City. We had staff development programs at Rensselaer Polytechnical Institute that took place during the summer. 55 never participated. They were booted out of the program at midpoint. 43 with an African-American principal, I won't call her name. They were only lackadaisical involved, and they walked away from the program at midpoint after 2 years in the program of a 5-year program. 39 was the only school to stay in the program the entire 5 years. It was well funded. It meant that each school would have added to their budget almost $1 million over that period of time. 39 with the black principal, Cecilia Golden, ran an extraordinary program at School 39. She created an environmental situation where teachers felt that they could prosper. For example, one of the teachers was the State Teacher of the Year in 1999, and then the National Teacher of the Year in 2005. So I think if children are introduced at an early age to things that have scientific implications, like nature studies, going to museums and so forth, that can stimulate the mind, but the child has to be exposed to those things. At my school, school number 10, last year, we had 4th graders went to the Corning Science Museum, the Glass Museum, and then the 5th graders went. Both of them were overjoyed at it, and they were kind of creative about what they had seen and what they think they could do in the field of science. So I think it's exposure that our children need to stimulate their interest in science and technology. And I think I'm a firm believer in our children having the experiences at an early age, and that's what excites them.
Especially with universities that are surround us that really have an amazing STEM emphasis, like RIT and U of R as well. Probably be great. I know RIT does do some things where they take some of our kids from the RCSD and involve them in camps and involve them in programs, and they even reach out to the young women in our schools, because there's also a lack of woman representation in STEM. So what we're gonna do real quick is reflect back on your high school days. In addition to having this curiosity about the scientific world, you were also a student athlete, right? You played football, you did track and field, and you sensed that there was a responsibility that you still had to maintain in that. So when you saw certain racial disparities or discrimination going on, you called it out. And in one particular instance, you rallied the black football players in your high school to boycott when there was about 30% black players, right? You encouraged them to boycott because they would not have black cheerleaders on the team. Because of this, the coach was like, well, we need them, fix the rule. But you also refused to stand for the pledge. And this is all the way in the 40s, correct?
Yeah, that was at the height of World War II. We had good assembly programs. For example, one assembly we had a former member of the German Reichstag, which was the governing body of Germany after World War I. So the next speaker was a representative of the American Arabian Oil Company in the Mideast. And he gave a presentation, then he showed a movie. And the movie was racist in terms of the opportunities for people who were darker complexion. They did the menial labor jobs, and as the color got lighter, the skills of the jobs got better. And so we were to sing the national anthem. Now, this is at the height of World War II. I refused to stand for it as a ninth grader. And I was sent to the office, and the principal, Mr. Stabler, he came in, and he didn't say, I'm going to suspend you for 3 days. He said, well, Walter, you ought to know better than what you did there. But on assessing my not being suspended for 3 days, he did not want to make a cause célèbre out of me because I was top student and top athlete in the school, and it would have opened up the minds of a whole lots of students, and they would have asked the question why.
Compare that to, so we fast forward from the 40s into the 2000s, compare that to an NFL athlete who decides not to stand for the pledge in protest, Colin Kaepernick. When you think about that, and when you saw that going on, you saw the ripple effects of other athletes taking knees, even in our own district, Rochester City School District, there were student athletes taking knees. When you saw that, how did that make you reflect on your own actions? And then what did it make you think about? What are some things we're doing that we forgot to do in order to fight for our rights? What are some things that we need to start doing that we haven't done before?
Well, it really thrilled me to see such a stand was made, particularly the protest by Kaepernick was against the unjustifiable killing of blacks by the police in this country. And so by conscience, he took a stand not to stand up for the national anthem, which I think is a legitimate form of protest. I've even think that, and I've written the NAACP, which I'm a life member of, suggesting that Kaepernick, during this year's annual meeting of the NAACP, he should be awarded the Spingarn Award. Spingarn was one of the original founders of the NAACP in 1909. But they don't answer the letters. And I looked at it in terms of, I remember when I was in college, I was scouted not by the National Football League, but I was scouted by the American Football League. by the San Diego. San Diego had a team in the American Football League at that time. The NFL wouldn't look at a black football player. My college roommate from Donora, Pennsylvania, Deacon Dan Towler, it took a former coach at West Virginia University who was now on the staff of the Los Angeles Rams. He pleaded for the Rams to draft him, and he was drafted number 25, but he later on went and made All-Pro. So people forget there were huge barriers. Baseball, the professional sports just barred African Americans. And you know, even in this community, one of the first blacks to be part of the NBA was Walter Dukes, who played at Syracuse. And he actually became a member of the Syracuse Nationals that used to be in the NBA teams. And so we've had to fight for everything that we have achieved, even an opportunity to work. When I first received a bachelor's in science at Washington and Jefferson College in 1950, the college had a process wherein there was a recruitment office. You deposited your resume and other credentials at the recruitment office. So when a recruiter came in, he'd look at resumes and if there were an individual whose background seemed compatible with their needs, you were called over for an interview. The person I was called over, by body language, we know when something's awry. The recruiter was from DuPont, and he caught himself and he went through a litany of praise: chemistry honorary society, football star, officer of your class, and so forth. In his last statement, he said, "But we don't hire blacks in our research facility in Wilmington, Delaware." And I looked at him and I said, "You have a problem," and I walked out. Even when I was receiving my PhD in the process, the latter stages, and companies were coming around, no oil company, I'm talking about 1954, 55, no oil company would interview you, even though your research had some correlation to their own interests. And very few chemical companies would interview you. So I was married at that time and we had a son. And I told my wife I had been in an international conference. I met a scientist from the University of Uppsala in Sweden and, started kind of a friendly relationship. And he asked me what I was going to do. I said, "Well, I'm looking for an industrial job in the United States." But he said, "Well, if you run into trouble, you can be my postdoc at the University of Uppsala in Sweden." So
you got support outside of your own country before you got support from your own country?
Global. Often you find a better opportunity in the global economy than your own economy in this country. See, I never forgot that, because with my oldest son, he went to Princeton and Rider College and then received an MBA in international marketing from the University of California at Berkeley. So he worked for Quaker in Chicago for a short period of time, and he said nothing he did satisfied his boss. So I said, "Well, you don't have to stay here. I taught you and your brother that you're going to be equipped to participate in the global economy." So he had met a young lady from Austria, and he got married and he went to Austria to live, and he worked for 20 years with Philips Corporation in Vienna, Austria, without any problem, well received, has 2 sons who have dual citizenship. And one of his sons is a teacher in Vienna. The other one just accepted a job in Lisbon, Portugal. See, I think what African Americans must understand is if the opportunity's not here, you can go to other places in the world. You're part of the global economy. See, we have a history of that. The early innovators of jazz, Louis Armstrong, Sidney Bechet, Lil Hardin, and others. The music that they were playing around 1919 and 1920, music critics in the major U.S. newspapers, from the New York Times to the San Francisco Chronicle, they said, well, what these people are playing is not a true art form. It's primitivism at best. So these early innovators of jazz said, we don't care what they say about us. We're determined to pursue this art form. So we will continue to hone and refine this Afro-Cuban idiom. And it became jazz. And then, of course, once you create something, there's always this expropriation. The early bands that really benefited from jazz were white.
Sure.
The monetary compensation.
I want to build on that, and that's a perfect segue into actually this next question. Now, you've lived, Dr. Cooper, through a number of eras, musical and otherwise, but you've experienced, take it back to Dixieland and Big Band and swing and rock and roll and bebop and black arts movement and now hip hop. And so having the benefit of kind of seeing all of these musical styles come to pass and the interplay with culture and politics that occurred at different times, and the interaction with education also, I'm interested on your views on those particular forms and the impact that they had, and also I'd like you to touch on hip-hop and how it fits into that spectrum and its impact and interplay with culture and education today.
Well, what confronts us as the people, we're creative, but often the financial rewards from that creativity is lost. You just don't benefit by what you've created. Whether it was music, art, or anything else, and you paid a heavy price because it was not recognized until the majority group said, well, you can make money out of it. Then it becomes recognized, and you play only a minor role in terms of accumulating the quantity of money that rightfully belongs to you based upon your innovativeness. But like I tell people I grew up, it's just like when we talk about hip-hop, even tap dancing, the way Honey Coles and others in Harlem did it. It was very creative, but it ended up in Hollywood with somebody else doing it, Fred Astaire. He couldn't deal with the Honey Coles in terms of expertise, but from a position of economic benefit, he could go to Hollywood. Honey Coles and his brother couldn't. So we have, I think what we have underestimated is that the economic determinism in this society, everything has economic potential. I couldn't help but reflect on in August 1960, when Adam Clayton Powell came to Rochester to campaign for John F. Kennedy for president. Gave a talk at Mount Olivet Baptist Church. It was crowded. He was came in a little late as usual, handsome, dressed to the nines, and he gave a very interesting recommendation that we should vote for John F. Kennedy. But he ended his talk by saying, "You may not remember much of what I've said tonight, but this is one thing I want you to remember, that the Holy Trinity in the United States is God the Father, God the Son, God the dollar bill. You live in an economically deterministic system." And see, I think by nature, and this has been the vexation of the continent of Africa, we are not economically driven to the extent that the white population is. We generally see much more the artistic form of whatever talent we have, and whether it's music or art or dance or something like that. And so, but almost invariably, the benefits of those artistic innovativeness goes to the majority group.
Yeah, hip-hop is a particularly interesting situation because it's become a worldwide phenomenon now, and it's in many respects lost a lot of the trappings of the early innovation. So we have a music that's called hip-hop, but it's commoditized and fully commercialized, and there aren't black folks at the table where the money is being made in many cases. So
that's the historical pattern, and it's, you know, even rap was like that. Now you have the white rapper, and as prior to really taping this, I was relating to you when I was a young man. Blacks rap, but they didn't put it to music. And what they also did was very creative. They would take a historical event and insert into that event a mythical black hero. Shine in the sinking of the Titanic, for example. Shine was the world's best swimmer. And when the Titanic started going down, the story goes, Shine hit the water and started stroking toward England, the port city, and whites ran up to the deck and said, "Shine, oh shine, please save poor me. I'll make you as rich as it can be." Shine said, "There's sharks in the ocean and sharks in the sea. If you want to save your ASS, you better swim like me." Mm-hmm. And it goes on and on. So,
yeah.
And blacks were creative. You know, in the 20s, the railroad was kind of prominent, and so they would create little stories like the Hobo's Convention. The 10th of May was a hell of a day, and all the counts and no accounts were gathered. There was Dead-Eye Dick from Hickory Stick, Little Lou from Kalamazoo, Big Mac from Hackensack, and on and on and on. So being denied what I would call commercial outlets for your talent was not a barrier to blacks expressing it.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
We're going to continue this conversation into part 2. For those who are in part 1 right now, you can catch part 2 at the same radio station you heard part 1, 104.3 Whale FM. You can catch us on Tuesday from 1:30 to 2 o'clock. We'll also be posting it online. Peace and progress.
This has been a really interesting and cool interview with Dr. Walter Cooper. We're taking this up into part 2. Peace, y'all.